This week's challenge comes to us from Dave in Chicago. He writes, Dear Mr. Wilson, what can you do with the tracker? Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know, a tracker is a piece of software that contains information both about musical notes and about the sounds which are supposed to fill in those notes. So the thing about trackers is that they're just awful to write with. Unless you have a monster screen or you're writing an incredibly short piece of music, tracking software can only show you a little tiny portion of your work at any given time. And the layout will tell you what you need to know about your notes, but it lacks the easy visual indication of pitch and rhythmic value that you get from conventional notation. In short, trackers are made for computers, not for people. So the first part of the challenge is learning the software and overcoming that gap. So for this week's challenge, like usual, I did nearly all of my pre-writing in simple ink and paper, the old-fashioned way, with dots and lines. The limitations of the instrument are also a big part of the attraction for a lot of people. Trackers put limits on the quality of the sound palette that you have to begin with, which, if you choose to think of it this way, kind of levels the playing field for people who can't or don't play conventional instruments or who can't be bothered with the time and expense that goes into making a recording with an analog instrument. Although you can only get one pitch at a time from each of your channels, computers aren't limited by analog notions of range and tessitura. One channel on my computer has a bigger range than an entire orchestra, and it can jump from one end of that range to the other within milliseconds with no problem at all. So that means that certain practical restrictions on voice leading can just go out the window. It also means that one channel can carry two or more lines at the same time, provided that no two notes occur simultaneously. You can ask your computer to play technical passages that would be amazingly difficult for any human performer. Trackers fall short in a big way, though, when it comes to interpretation, because they play exactly what you program. Every note is going to sound exactly the same until you tell the computer to do otherwise, and even then the computer will only ever do exactly what you tell it to. So interpretation in a computer can only be as detailed as it's programmed to be, which means that the niceties like phrasing and articulation require a relatively cumbersome expenditure of time and attention on the part of the user. All right, on to the music. Here's what I started with this week. Now, I know what you're thinking, so let's get that out of the way to begin with. Yes, it does fit. And yeah, that fits too. For all of you non-musical people watching, yeah, we totally do that on purpose just to mess with your head. Okay, the left hand in my sketch is just a placeholder, so I replaced that with something a little bit more vaguely contemporary sounding to help establish a rhythmic motive that'll fill in later with something kind of resembling percussion. Another feature of trackers, which is both a strength and weakness, is the propensity for repetition. The software is built for looping, to the extent that it can be a headache sometimes to try to do something other than just bland repetition. Whatever, I'll go with it. Next, I need something to offset the repetition with some focus on some slightly more active harmonies, and something static to fill in the gaps. And to round that out, something shiny and reflective with bright flashing neon colors. And then I'll slap all of that together into a completely predictable 20th century singer-songwriter form. Verse, verse, bridge, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, chorus, big finish, kablooey or something like that. So, for as much as you can accomplish on paper, I think it's safe to say that the fair majority of the appeal of 8-bit or chip tunes or trackers, whatever, comes from the rainbow happy goodness that you get from the instrument itself. When I transcribe into the tracking software, I'm adding some characteristic sound effects and envelopes as I go along. And while the instrument takes a little while to get used to, the principles that you apply are really the same as you would learn as an instrumentalist. Alright, the challenge for this week is writing for a tracker. There's lots of options out there. Some of them are cheap and some of them are free. As long as you've got a computer, you've got all the tools that you need. So sound off in the comments, show me your music, and I'll see you next time.